And let's return to a very important subject here, and that, of course, is migration and those small boats crossings. Now, 4 migrants have died trying to cross the Channel from France to the UK. It brings the total number of people who have died this year making that very perilous journey to 19. Well, how big is the scale of the problem, and how can this new government start to address the root causes? This was a huge issue for the last Conservative government. It will be a huge issue for this new Labour government. Well, joining me now is Peter Walsh, who's a senior researcher at the Migration Observatory. Peter, welcome to the show. Now, we've got 19 people who have sadly lost their lives crossing this year. How does that compare to last year's figures?
That's a good question. Off the top of my head, I'm not entirely sure. I'd have thought it wouldn't have been quite as high. I do know that in the past 10 years, the grim tally is up to 250. And I also know that this rather pales in comparison to the situation across the Mediterranean, where in that same period, 30,000 people lost their lives. So that puts it in a broader perspective, but always awful to
Yeah.
see news like this.
And the number of people arriving in small boats this year so far is up. I think it's sort of just over 12,500. That's a rise of 16% compared to the same period last year for 2023. Is there any reason for this rise? Is there anything that you can point to?
It's actually really difficult. These numbers go up and down for all sorts of reasons, and it's very difficult to know what the root causes are. I mean, the best example of this was the arrival of about 11,000 Albanians in the summer of 2022, a very big increase over the summer, and then an equally rapid decrease actually before Rishi Sunak announced the cooperation agreement with Albania. It's really difficult to know. As of yesterday, 14,000 people have arrived so far this year. That's only a couple of hundred more than last year, but it's 1,000 more than 2022, which was the record year when 46,000 people roughly arrived. So what this tells us is that it's too early to know what the total number will be
Okay.
this year.
And, I suppose the question that my listeners will want to know is, what can tangibly be done to get these numbers down? I mean, nobody should be supporting people coming over in this way. It's very, very dangerous. I mean, we've got a new Labour Home Secretary. They're talking about this border command. Do you think that will get these numbers down?
I think questions can reasonably be raised about the efficacy of this. There's a real lack of clarity at this point about what exactly is new about this. It's an enforcement-heavy approach. The Conservative government's approach was equally enforcement-heavy. We'll have sent about €1 billion to France by the end of 2027, and that's just to enhance enforcement and beef up policing of the beaches. But that just shows you the magnitude of the challenge that is faced. The French point to 300 kilometers of viable coastline from which these boats depart. That's very difficult to police. There are real questions, therefore, about just how much juice can be squeezed from the enforcement orange. But the devil will be in the detail. The details are fairly light on the ground for the moment. But it may be that the Labour Party soon learns, just how difficult an issue this is to manage.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a difficult issue. And you're talking about people who are incredibly desperate in order to make that dangerous journey. And, they don't seem to be dissuaded from it. And Peter, just before we let you go very briefly, just in terms of the countries from which people are coming, what are the sort of main countries, the sort of top 3, 4, 5 countries?
Yeah, well, they're some of the most chaotic countries in the world. The number one over the past couple of years has been Afghanistan. No surprises there, but also Iran, Iraq, Syria, Eritrea, Yemen. These are countries that suffer under political repression or are racked by civil or ethnic conflict of various kinds. Most of these people claim asylum, and those that have had their claims processed large majorities, upwards of 80%, are successful in those asylum claims.
And as actually, to be fair to Rishi Sunak, he did make that point in one of the debates that when you're dealing with these kind of countries, let's say Afghanistan, it's very difficult to negotiate a returns deal with the Taliban, for example. So, this is a very, very difficult problem to solve, with very tragic consequences. We've just been talking about 4 migrants. Well, 4 human beings have died trying to cross the channel. Peter, great to chat with you. Thanks very much for your time. That's Peter Walsh, senior researcher at the Migration Observatory. A couple of messages from people. Paul says the new Home Secretary, amongst others, have contributed to the boat crisis with their various campaigns and social media messages saying refugee welcome. This encourages more to come over regardless of personal risk. And I think it's Colin from Suffolk says, start deporting illegals as soon as they get there. That will stop them trying. Well, let's see if that does happen, Colin, because I think nothing seems to be stopping people from trying to come over here in these very, very dangerous circumstances.
Well, nobody should be making these dangerous boat crossings. This undermines border security, but it also puts lives at risk. Well, we have to have a major upgrade in law enforcement. That is what I have immediately started work on, and that is why we are setting up the new Border Security Command. It will need to start work as soon as possible, and that's why we are immediately launching the process to recruit the new Border Security Commander, but also to make sure we have new cross-border police and to get new powers, counter-terror powers in place for them to have the powers that they need to go after the criminal gangs so that we can make rapid progress. It's not in our manifesto, that is not our approach. What we're doing is targeting enforcement and setting up a new enforcement unit, a returns and enforcement unit, in order to be able to tackle both illegal migration, illegal working, and also to make sure that returns take place, because they have plummeted under the Conservatives. Well, the Prime Minister has obviously set out the position on the Rwanda scheme, whereas we know the Conservatives ran this scheme for 2.5 years and sent simply 4 volunteers, as well as hundreds of millions of pounds. I will be auditing all of the details around the money and the legislation and the processes, and I will set out more details to Parliament. But the first step in our approach to all of these issues is to make sure we are putting the money instead into boosting our border security, and that is why we are today launching the Border Security Command process to make sure that we can get the new commander and new cross-border police in place in order to strengthen Britain's border security. That is my key priority as incoming Home Secretary, is to strengthen Britain's border security, where I think we have been let down for too long.